Ad Astra was released in 2019, and at the time I remember hearing very lukewarm reviews about the movie, so I never bothered watching it until last night. It stars Brad Pitt in one of his most understated roles as an astronaut named Roy McBride. When mysterious power surges start happening all over the solar system, he's tasked with investigating. These surges threaten life on Earth, and it turns out they're coming from the antimatter power source of a space station called the Lima Project, which was headed by Roy's father, Clifford McBride. The Lima Project was about trying to find life in the galaxy. Now, throughout the film, we're treated to hearing Roy's thoughts via a voiceover. These can serve as, sometimes, clunky info dumps. These can take the form of psych evaluations. Some of these can be quite uninteresting and, I think, unnecessary at times. One of them in particular feels like a very tell, don't show kind of insight into the character, with Roy basically explaining his entire backstory and relationship with his father, how he walls off his emotions from the world and pushes people away in order to hide his anger and pain. It's too much thrown at the audience without showing it, to be honest. Although later we do finally get to see a glimpse of Roy's rage when he discovers the truth about his father and how his superiors are preventing him from going to Neptune to confront him. Now, at a personal level, I've begun to become quite forgiving of this kind of writing, given how much I've learned about exposition and character development as part of writing my own novel. It's much more difficult than I realised. Roy goes on a series of journeys to finally get to Neptune. First, there's a commercial space flight to the moon, where he's going to use a long-range rocket to venture to Mars. On Mars, he will use an underground communications base to send a message to his father on Neptune to try to talk him down off the ledge. Okay, so he goes to the moon, and he's accompanied by Colonel Thomas Pruitt, a former friend of Roy's father. He's played by the late Donald Sutherland. It's always nice to have Donald Sutherland in a movie. He's certainly in the movie, putting in a very convincing performance as always, but he doesn't have very much to do. He goes with Roy to the moon for some reason, and then after an attack by some moon pirates, he's too unwell to travel to continue to Mars. He had very little screen time. Now, in my opinion, this film feels like the filmmakers took a look at Interstellar and the likes of Blade Runner 2049, Moon, Solaris, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and wanted to try to emulate those kinds of cerebral movies, in particular Interstellar and 2001, to create a film that tried to approximate those kinds of films in terms of visual style, ambience, tone, theatricality, scope, and relatively slow pacing, to create the kind of tension that those films have, the bleak darkness and terror and danger of space travel, but also the awe and wonder as well. And I think it's all there, actually, by and large. Ad Astra does achieve much of this extremely well, on a purely superficial level, I might say. The production values are superb, the CGI and practical effects are wonderful, the sets, the creative composition of shots, the long artsy scenes, it's all there, it's all done very well. But the film lacks a good story, and it places style over substance to the point where the film just drags enormously. It is so plodding, so slow, so lacking in character, lacking in heart, lacking in meaning and depth. It's not clever, it's not engaging. Quite honestly, it's a bit of a chore to watch. And because its story is so weak, it feels as though they were trying to compensate with really good visuals and special effects. It feels as though they thought, well, we'll just try to make a film that sort of looks and feels like 2001 or Interstellar, on the surface at least, and we'll try to have a basic plot tacked on as well. As a result, the film feels very pretentious. So there's a bunch of arbitrary action set pieces in the film that Roy has to get through, which feels like they were just trying to give the audience something to chew on before he finally reaches his destination. The action scene on the moon with the rovers and the moon pirates is very well done. Visually impressive and exciting, but it has nothing to do with the story. We're told there's a war going on, and it's sort of the Wild West on the moon, and there's some explanation about this, but then as soon as we leave the moon, it's just forgotten about, proving that the entire thing was just contrived in order to have this arbitrary action set piece. So then Roy flies off to Mars, and he's met with another arbitrary obstacle on the way, a distress call, and the ship goes to another research outpost where some baboons have killed the crew. And it's all quite grisly. Again, it's just a bunch of random action for no reason. What has any of this got to do with the story? It's like they felt they needed to stick about 20 minutes of stuff into the movie so that Roy didn't arrive at Mars too early. So 2 action set pieces were just chucked into the movie to sort of slow it down a bit. So then he gets to Mars. He sends a couple of audio messages to his father. He gets approached by a woman who shares classified information with him. His father went psycho on the Lima project. There was a mutiny. He killed the crew by shutting off their life support, and her parents were killed in the process. So Clifford didn't want to stop exploring. He wanted to keep searching for life, but the Lima crew wanted to go home. He wouldn't let them. So now Roy knows that his father has gone nuts, basically. So this is probably the best part of the film because Roy finally starts to emote now that he's angered by the fact that he's not allowed to travel to Neptune. So he stows away on the ship that's going there, and what happens next is really contrived. The crew are launching from Mars to go to Neptune, so he boards the ship without them knowing, and then the crew are ordered to kill him while the ship is launching. I mean, it's so stupid because what happens is, in the struggle to apprehend him, the crew are accidentally killed. So he's very conveniently left alone on the ship. So what happened here was, I think, it's like the writers sort of backed themselves into a corner. They needed to have a situation where Roy ended up on the ship on his own, so that basically he would be meeting his father on his own when he got to Neptune. That's the situation they wanted to create. But the only way they could do that was to make it so that the other crew members were out of the way. So they had to be killed off in a kind of a clumsy fashion. And this is what they came up with. In reality, the Space Authority, Spacecom, would probably have just ordered them to allow him on board the ship and continue with the mission to Neptune. I mean, how harmful could he be to the mission at that point? But instead, they confront him at the most dangerous moment of the mission, the launch. And so they're all killed, stupidly, and now Roy has the ship to himself. So he goes to the Lima project after an extended period of solitude in space, contemplating his life and dreaming, and he's struggling to maintain his mental state. This is mostly done in a pretty decent montage. Long story short, he gets to the Lima project, he boards the station, he finds the dead bodies of the crew, and he talks to his dad, played by Tommy Lee Jones. Clifford tells him he never really cared about him or his mother. He was always just about the mission. That was his destiny. He's clearly mentally unwell, unstable, and dangerous. Roy tells him that he still loves him, and eventually convinces him to come home with him. But while they're in space together, Clifford eventually refuses, and he asks his son to let him go, to let him float out into space to his death, which Roy reluctantly agrees to. So then Roy flies home, not before detonating the Lima project with an explosive device. He brings the data that Clifford got together during the project, and it shows that there's no intelligent life in the galaxy. This is so utterly ridiculous. It's just, how do I even respond to that? Clifford and the Lima project took images of, quite a few exoplanets, but how could anyone possibly deduce from that we're alone in all of the universe from a handful of images? There's practically an infinite number of planets out there. So dumb. So anyway, Roy gets home to Earth, and then he gives a report where he says he feels great, and he reunites with his estranged wife. The end. Oh, by the way, Liv Tyler is in this movie. Just about. She has a very small role, mostly in tiny flashbacks and video messages that Roy watches. What's disappointing is that at the core of this movie is a very weak and very negative father-son story. And I really don't think we need yet another negative father-son estrangement, abandonment story, which Hollywood has done quite a lot over the years. Ad Astra is such a strange movie. On paper, everything is there for the next Interstellar, the next blockbuster, smash hit, sci-fi, space opera classic. It's a big cast, it's a Brad Pitt movie, amazing visuals, great direction by James Gray. I'm not a big fan of the soundtrack by Max Richter. I don't think it's as memorable as it could have been. But the plot is just anemic and the characters are dull. You don't feel anything for them. Roy telling you about his past relationship with his father isn't interesting or even convincing. That doesn't generate an emotional response. And when he finally does meet his father, they're together on screen for a few minutes, nothing really happens, there's no real closure, there's no satisfying payoff, and it's like the filmmakers felt they didn't need to concentrate on fleshing out the characters or the story because they were too busy making a film that visually looked and felt like Interstellar or 2001. It was like that was their main priority. The film is very impressive looking, extremely well put together, beautifully shot, gorgeous, and has very memorable sequences. It's got breathtaking effects. From a technical perspective, it's quite good. If the script had have just been a bit better, Ad Astra would have been talked about in the same conversation as the likes of Interstellar, Solaris, or 2001. Ad Astra is just, unfortunately, a massive missed opportunity. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Please subscribe for more, hit that like button and share this video. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.